Welcome to Juvo Hub, your helping hand in property management education. We are so thankful that you have joined us, and please remember to follow and like us on your favorite social media outlet, which you can find in our show notes. Now let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Juvo Hub podcast, your helping hand in property management education. I am super duper awesomely happy to have with us today Rebecca Stephenson, the HR Services Consulting Director from Higginbotham. She is bringing to the table today an important topic, one that, depending on where you are at, your position in the company, can be one that maybe causes jitters a little bit, and that's performance management. But we've got Rebecca here today. She's a trainer on this topic. She's an industry expert on this topic. So we're looking forward to hearing her feedback. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're looking forward to hearing your tips and best practices, because performance management, nothing new. That is something that has been built into corporate culture, company culture for many, many, many years now. It's gone through its peaks and its valleys as technology has come into play, but the fundamentals are still sometimes hard for us to grasp. But maybe we can start off with you giving us an understanding of the difference between a performance appraisal and performance management.
Absolutely. And you're correct. This has been around for many, many years. In fact, performance management started in the late 1800s, early 1900s, but at that time it was more of production management. So in a manufacturing setting, a person who could create 100 widgets versus someone who could create 90 widgets, that was how they measured their production or performance, and that had a direct impact on how much they were paid. So we're talking about a century-old practice here. Great question. So performance management versus performance appraisal. So a performance appraisal is an event, right? It's when you sit down with your manager and probably go through a document. Maybe there's a rating scale. You are looking at performance from a retrospective standpoint.
Right.
And often the purpose is to look for deficiencies or strengths and maybe talk about corrective behavior. So performance appraisal is an event. Performance management is an overall process that hopefully managers and companies are fulfilling with their employees on an ongoing basis. So performance management looks like ongoing communication, ongoing feedback. Maybe it has some goal setting involved, and it's a fluid, live interaction between management and employees on performance improvement, things like that.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah. Thank you for highlighting the difference between the two. So from our audience perspective, they're like, okay, love the history lesson, love the identifying of what those two items are. Some may be still hesitant to go down this road of having both of those in place. So what's been your experience as far as like the pros and cons of having a performance management program?
The reality is that the majority of the companies I've worked with over the years, which is a lot, they unfortunately look at performance reviews or the appraisal event itself like a necessary evil, like a check the box item, something that they just have to do. The companies that are really coming into the 21st century and wanting to be more modern, more innovative, more cutting edge, they are looking more at performance management as, like I mentioned earlier, that ongoing process. So in my experience, statistically, 70 to 90% of companies do conduct annual performance reviews. So that's the majority, right? But the performance management process is far less.
Got it. Yeah. And that's unfortunate, to hear, because that's that's been my experience overall. It's like, especially in the apartment industry, in the property management industry, I've been involved in mystery shops as an example. And mystery shops were a classic item where an employee be like, oh no, it's like I'm being shopped. And there's this fear because this was going to be a tool that would associate their performance, and there was a score. And there was just this unfortunate fear that came with it, as opposed to, I think, more to your point, well, that should be something that's just a part of the culture, the ongoing employee cycle of learning, developing, improving, and being able to find where there's deficiencies and say, okay, this is what we're going to do to help you improve and help you have a different perspective on a particular challenge that you're having. Does that sound more along the line of, like, I guess the dream is to have that for a company to have that as a daily part of the vitality of the employee and their performance?
100%.
Okay.
Someone, I can't take credit for this, but at some point in my career, someone said an employee should never be surprised when they sit down for their performance review. So if a performance review is a singular event where there is no conversation about your performance in between, right? Theoretically, you could sit down and be surprised. That should never happen. You should never sit down and find out that your manager feels like your performance is substandard. That should be, something you've been discussing weekly, monthly, quarterly during the course of the year.
Right.
But yes, I think that, well, in some organizations and with really good, well-trained managers that understand the benefit of ongoing communication, they're naturally doing performance management, maybe not even calling it that. They're giving their employees constant feedback. They're taking the time to sit down if an employee does need additional training or development and working toward those goals with them. Again, they may not even know they're doing it. Those are great managers. And but the idea of implementing a performance management system it's a big undertaking, which is why a lot of companies, like I said, it may be that some managers are doing it just organically, but you really have to have that executive buy-in, and then all of your frontline managers really need to be aware and trained in how to do the communication and the feedback necessary to really impact an employee's performance.
I like how you tied that together. That's excellent. I know our audience just is like, okay, there we go. There's the dots that are being connected right now. There's the culture of performance management, which is like on an individual and in leadership. And then there's the organizational component too. And they have to be able to work in harmony. So love it. That is fantastic. So, and when you and I were talking before we started hit the record button, we were just sharing some of the attitudes that are out there. And unfortunately, as I was mentioning, like with the mystery shops as an example, like there's some pretty junky attitudes about performance management that they're, this is from the 1800s, as you mentioned. It's like, this is right. How long it's been. Why are we even doing them? So with your experience in working with so many organizations, how do you address someone who's just like has that wall up, that barrier up?
Ideally, you're in a situation where the performance review process is well thought through and well executed. Those negative attitudes, the negative thoughts about performance reviews, I mean, rightfully so, right? There are some organizations who throw that annual review out and there is nothing in between. Oftentimes it has a format with a rating scale 1 to 5, right? Very little ability for maybe dialogue or commentary, different strengths listed, and then you just get a score. That doesn't feel very personal. And for a lot of employees, well, let me add to that. There's a lot of conversation in performance management about the significance of the rater when it comes to the scoring. And the statistic escapes me right now, but it's more than 50%. In certain studies show that the ratings are more dependent on the rater than the ratee. So what constitutes needs improvement to me might look different to you.
Right.
You know, what's excellent to me might look different to you. So, and then add to that, and this is part of the trainings I've done for performance management processes as well, is the biases that can exist, the unconscious and conscious biases with managers. Well, you know, my manager scored me less than my colleague because they're friends and they party together on the weekends. Right?
Yep.
So there, unfortunately, there are, in a lot of cases, negative feelings about performance reviews. I think that, again, we talk about company culture. That is something that is easily remedied if the performance management process is delivered and executed well, with well intentions, and made a little more personal.
Are your supervisors in compliance? When supervisors make mistakes, everyone is at risk. Compliance training lowers that risk. JuvoHub is happy to announce its new online course, Sexual Harassment Prevention and Training for Supervisors. Learn more about this course at juvohub.com, your helping hand in property management education.
That's fantastic. And thank you so much, Rebecca. I think you really highlighted that it's up to us as leaders to change. Like if it's stale and outdated, then what have you done? When's the last time you've actually looked at it? Are you in line with current thinking, current trends, current employee needs? And I know it's another whole subject. Maybe you're going to touch on it later in the podcast, but I think of that bias that you were mentioning, and I've talked to organizations who are employing like 360 type peer reviews versus just the traditional manager review and so on. But one of my favorite points that you mentioned is going beyond just the score. It's like, okay, here's the score, and like, what's the follow-up? Like, what are you doing to follow up with it, as opposed to them getting an email with a score? Like, where, if an employee gets like, okay, if they did score low on something, are they going to be trained? Are they going to be mentored? Are they going to be coached? Like, what's the follow-up? And that to me makes an employee feel much more satisfied, knowing that they're going to get that backup. So excellent. I love it.
Absolutely. Yes. Companies who invest, as we know, invest in their employees, not just financially, but in time, with their time. And yes, taking the time to say, okay, here are the areas that need improvement. Let's talk together about what can we do? What can I do as your employer, your manager? What can you do to improve those things, rather than just slapping a score on you and saying, see you next year when we rate you again.
Right. Perfect. Okay. So I think this is a really appropriate time then. Like you've kind of given us a nice timeline, pros, cons, attitudes that need to be addressed, dust off what you have, make some adjustments, freshen it up. So what are those trends? Like, what are you seeing forward-thinking companies doing? What are you recommending in order to bring life back to a performance management program?
Yeah, great question. So some of the trends I've seen, so I know we've talked a lot about a manager reviewing their employee, right? Their direct report. Obviously, there are peer-to-peer reviews. There are upward reviews where an employee rates their leader. Self-reviews where someone has the ability to rate themselves. For someone with, I'll say, my personality, for example, where I am far more critical of myself than anyone could ever be of me, a self-review is very beneficial. I'd let my boss know that. But so, there all of the different directions, the 360s, and there's I think there's a lot to be said for it has to fit the organization, right? If the organization has a lot of teams that collaborate together, work directly together on projects, then those peer reviews make a lot of sense. In other organizations, they might not make as much sense. But other trends that I've seen that I really like are goal setting. And because when you conduct a performance review, what is your baseline? In most cases, it's the job description, right? You are saying, okay, based on the job you were hired for, your job description shows these duties and responsibilities. Now we're going to rate you on how well you do those things. The setting for an individual to have the ability to say, all right, I have these goals for the next quarter, the next 6 months, the next year. And the goals might be related to a specific project. It might be related to profitability. Something that's really advanced, but is fantastic, is if they can take the time to align the individual's goals to the company goals, or even individual to team to company. Those aligned goals can have a huge impact on the bottom line for a company. And then I love developmental goals. Love developmental goals. So I do this with my own reports. Is there a certification they want to get? Is there a software program they want to get more proficient in? And then they set those developmental goals, and then we sit down X time later, 3 months later. What's your progress? Are there any, have you had any barriers to being able to accomplish that? What can I do to help? And that's that constant communication and feedback. So goal setting and addressing those items on a frequent basis, ideally quarterly, is probably my personal favorite trend. And it doesn't have to take that much time. I mean, we're talking about 3, 4, maybe 5 goals.
Standing ovation to that. That is fantastic. I love it. I absolutely love it. And I've read about it. I've heard a couple of the people talking about it. I'm so grateful that you are bringing this to the table for our audience, because just looking at statistics, Swift Bunny is one that I read a lot of their statistics about employee engagement. And one of the items that they highlight is they don't see a path forward in their career with an organization. Well, right. What you're demonstrating right now, well, there's the path. It's like, okay, now someone can see, because their organization is providing a timeline, some goals, something to look forward to. And there is now a path towards that. So I think that's fantastic and brilliant. And I really, I know our audience is like, okay, what can we do? There's something that we can do today, because it doesn't sound like to me like it has to be overly complicated. Like, if someone is just starting out, is there something simple that you would recommend them to start with?
100%. So the first item would be making the decision, right? Making the decision that this is going to be an organizational priority. And once that decision is made, if you know realistically, if you make it too complicated, it's not going to get done. And so earlier in the conversation, when I said the majority of the companies I've worked with maybe have an annual review that is a check the box item, it's because taking the time to develop anything more complicated just seems too daunting. So make the decision, decide that you want to keep it simple, but you want it to be more frequent. And you don't want it to look or feel like a check the box item for your employees. And you want your employees to know that you want to be engaged with them on their performance. And at the end of the day, it's what's best for the company. It's what's best for profitability. It highly impacts retention with employees. If employees feel like you care and are invested in them, they're less likely to leave.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rebecca. This is what I knew the show would be all about. Man, you brought it. This is fantastic. And for our audience, like we appreciate the fresh perspective. And for everyone listening to this show, dust it off. Take a look at what you're doing. Right. Talk about it as a team. See where you can make those adjustments, because for those who want to excel in their career, they are going to opt in to everything that you said today, Rebecca. So thank you so much for being
100%.
on the show today. Great conversation. Tell us a little bit about what you do at Higginbotham. And I know Higginbotham is very much involved in services like we've talked about on the show today.
Yeah, thank you. So I have been with Higginbotham for a little over 5 years. For the first almost 5, I was one of the HR business partners, HR consultants, which essentially means a company, hired us as a third party HR service for them. And I've worked with every industry you can imagine, obviously different size employee counts, multi-state, only in one state, all of the above. And the HR services that Higginbotham has to offer, for some organizations, they're small and maybe it doesn't make sense to hire a full-time HR manager. For other clients we have, they're large, they have a full HR team, they want an extra layer of expertise, people to collaborate with, maybe a vendor to give projects to. So my role now, however, sorry, skip this. I'm currently the HR consulting director. So the HR consultants we have all report to me. I absolutely love what I do. I love working on developing the consultants that I have on my team. And the added benefit of working with so many is that I don't just have my own clients now, I have everyone's clients. So I get to talk to everyone about situations that arise where maybe they want a second opinion, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I can tell just by this show and your overall demeanor, it must be very, very fulfilling what you do. I try to just put myself in your shoes for a moment, but what an awesome opportunity that you have. And so thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Share just a smidge of your expertise with our audience, help them understand the benefits that come from performance management. We look forward to having you on the show again in the near future.
I'm looking forward to it as well. And thank you for having me. I am very passionate about what I do. I'm glad that comes through. But yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. We're going to see you again soon. So thank you everyone for tuning into our show. I'm Jonathan Saar, your host of the Juvo Hub podcast. Thank you for listening to our show. Until next time, class dismissed. Take care, everyone.